You've probably heard of Abraham, Moses, and David, right? But what if I told you there's a biblical figure even more mysterious, one whose story is barely mentioned, yet his importance stretches across both the Old and New Testaments? Enter Melchizedek, the king and priest who seemingly appears out of nowhere. But why is he so significant? And what does his story mean for us today? Could understanding this ancient figure unlock deeper truths about faith, redemption, and Jesus himself? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into. In this video, we're uncovering the hidden layers of Melchizedek's story and why his legacy matters more than you might think. If you've ever wondered how this enigmatic priest-king ties into biblical history and your faith, you're in for something special. Melchizedek is one of those figures who pops up in the Bible, and immediately you're left thinking, wait, who is this guy? He's mentioned briefly, but the impact he leaves is massive. To start, Melchizedek first appears in the Old Testament, in Genesis, during Abraham's time. He's described as the king of Salem and a priest of the Most High God. What makes him stand out? Well, for one, he's both a king and a priest, which isn't something you see often in biblical narratives. That dual role is where things start getting interesting. Now, you might be wondering why that matters. Stick around, and you'll see how his significance unfolds across both the Old and New Testaments. It's fascinating that Melchizedek shows up, blesses Abraham, and then disappears just as quickly as he arrived. But that brief appearance is packed with meaning. As the king of Salem, which later becomes Jerusalem, and as a priest of God, Melchizedek's encounter with Abraham is a pivotal moment. He offers bread and wine, and in return, Abraham gives him a tithe. There's something powerful about this exchange, a king and priest receiving acknowledgement from the patriarch of faith. This moment not only sets the stage for what's to come, but also offers a glimpse of Melchizedek's role in the grand biblical narrative. Now let's talk symbolism. Melchizedek's name means King of Righteousness, and his title as King of Salem means peace. So right there, you've got a ruler whose identity is built on righteousness and peace. That's no small deal. This blend of justice and tranquility is rare in the Bible. Most kings were known for either their power or their flaws. But Melchizedek stands out as an embodiment of both kingly authority and spiritual purity. That's something you don't see every day, right? And of course, his role as priest adds another layer to his unique place in biblical history. But what about his connection to the Levitical priesthood? Now, this is where things get even more interesting. The Levitical priesthood came later, with Moses as God's chosen line to serve in the temple. But Melchizedek predates that system entirely, which raises a fascinating question. What kind of priesthood is he part of? This eternal priesthood, without recorded lineage or end, seems to transcend time. Melchizedek's priesthood isn't bound by the rules of inheritance, making him a precursor to something much bigger. And it's this bigger connection that will lead us right into the New Testament. Once you get to the New Testament, Melchizedek shows up again, this time in the book of Hebrews. Now, here's where the pieces really start to come together. Hebrews highlights Melchizedek as a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. You see, Christ is called a priest in the order of Melchizedek. That means Jesus' priesthood, like Melchizedek's, is eternal and unbound by earthly systems. Hebrews emphasizes that just as Melchizedek blessed Abraham, Jesus blesses us all. This connection offers a deeper understanding of Jesus' role as high priest, and it's something we can reflect on even today. In Genesis chapter 14, verses 18 through 20, Melchizedek enters the narrative in a unique way. After Abraham's victory in battle, Melchizedek, the king of Salem, approaches him. But Melchizedek isn't just a king, he's also a priest of the Most High God. This dual role as both king and priest sets him apart from other figures in the Old Testament. It's clear that his presence in this story holds significance, especially given his blessing over Abraham. When you think about it, the combination of royalty and priesthood makes Melchizedek a figure unlike any other during that time. The meeting between Melchizedek and Abraham isn't just a casual encounter. When Melchizedek offers bread and wine, it's a symbolic act. Bread and wine, familiar elements in religious traditions, are powerful symbols of blessing and hospitality. In return, Abraham gives him a tithe, 10% of his wealth. This gesture shows the respect Abraham has for Melchizedek's role and authority. It also marks the first mention of tithing in the Bible, a practice that would later become an essential part of religious life in Israel. Salem, the city Melchizedek rules, later becomes known as Jerusalem. It's interesting that the King of Salem also means King of Peace. This title carries weight, reflecting not only his rulership but also his character. The connection between righteousness and peace in his titles reveals the deeper significance of his kingship. In Melchizedek, we see a leader who brings both justice and peace, qualities often sought but rarely combined in one person. This sets the stage for his greater role in biblical history. Melchizedek's priesthood also stands out. At this point in the Bible, there's no formal priesthood established, especially not one connected to the line of Levi, which comes later. So, Melchizedek's role as a priest of the Most High God hints at something beyond the earthly systems we see develop later in Israel's history. His priesthood is not limited by lineage or tradition, making him a unique figure. This aspect of his identity plays a significant role in how he's understood in later texts. Melchizedek's titles hold a lot more meaning than they might seem at first glance. His name, Melchizedek, translates to King of Righteousness, which immediately gives us insight into his character. In biblical terms, righteousness isn't just about following the rules. It's about living in alignment with God's will, pursuing justice and integrity. For someone to be called the King of Righteousness, they would have to embody these qualities in their rulership. It's a name that makes us pause and consider the weight of his leadership, both as a king and as a priest. Then there's his role as the King of Salem, which means peace. So here we have a ruler who is not only just, but also brings peace. It's fascinating to see both righteousness and peace in one person because, let's be honest, those qualities don't always go hand in hand. In Melchizedek, we get a glimpse of a leader who governs not through power and oppression, but through justice and tranquility. That's a rare combination. In a world often filled with strife and conflict, Melchizedek represents the ideal leader, one who creates peace through righteousness. As a king and a priest, Melchizedek's dual role becomes even more significant. Kings in the Bible are usually focused on governing people, while priests are responsible for spiritual matters. But Melchizedek manages to combine both roles. This combination of king and priest is almost unheard of in the Bible. It makes Melchizedek a powerful figure because he can lead people both politically and spiritually. In this way, he stands as a bridge between the earthly and the divine, holding both authority and spiritual wisdom in one person. The idea of a priest-king is deeply symbolic. Melchizedek, as a king of righteousness and peace, represents a form of leadership that is both moral and spiritual. He leads by example, embodying both justice and mercy. This is a profound symbol for anyone studying leadership today, whether in the spiritual realm or in the everyday world. Think of it as a call to balance the need for structure with compassion, power with humility, and governance with moral clarity. The connection between Melchizedek and the Levitical priesthood is something that often raises questions. In the Old Testament, the Levitical priesthood, descended from Levi, one of the sons of Jacob, became the formal system of priests for Israel. These priests followed specific rules, performing sacrifices and rituals on behalf of the people. However, Melchizedek's priesthood is different. He predates Levi and doesn't belong to this structured system. Instead, his priesthood appears to be eternal, not tied to lineage or formalities. This contrast opens up a deeper discussion about spiritual authority and where it truly comes from. The Levitical priesthood, while central to Israel's religious life, was limited. Priests would offer sacrifices repeatedly for the sins of the people, and their role was passed down through generations. But Melchizedek's priesthood seems to bypass these earthly limitations. He's presented as a priest of the Most High God, but with no beginning or end recorded. This idea of an eternal priesthood stands in stark contrast to the Levitical system, which was temporary and transitional. Melchizedek's priesthood hints at something that goes beyond the earthly order. One key difference between the two is that the Levitical priests came from a specific tribe, meaning their role was tied to their birthright. Melchizedek's priesthood, on the other hand, seems to be based on his righteousness and relationship with God. This makes his priesthood not only eternal, but also more inclusive, in a sense. It's a priesthood not defined by earthly qualifications, but by divine appointment. That distinction is crucial in understanding his significance in the broader biblical story. Another interesting aspect is that while the Levitical priests offered sacrifices as a way to atone for sin, Melchizedek doesn't perform any sacrifices in the story. Instead, he blesses Abraham. This act of blessing, rather than sacrificing, shifts the focus from ritual to relationship. Melchizedek's role as priest seems less about maintaining religious law and more about extending God's favor and grace. It's an early sign that perhaps something greater than the Levitical system was always intended. Melchizedek reappears in the New Testament, specifically in the book of Hebrews, chapters 5 through 7. Here, the writer of Hebrews draws a direct connection between Melchizedek and Jesus Christ. In fact, it's said that Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek. Now, that's significant because, as we've seen, Melchizedek's priesthood is eternal and not tied to the Levitical system. By placing Jesus in this same priestly order, Hebrews highlights the unique and everlasting nature of Christ's priesthood. It's almost as if Melchizedek was a foreshadowing of Christ's role. The book of Hebrews portrays Jesus as the ultimate high priest, but unlike the Levitical priests, his priesthood has no end. Hebrews points out that while the Levitical priests had to offer sacrifices repeatedly, Jesus offered himself once for all. This comparison emphasizes the finality and completeness of Jesus' sacrifice. Just as Melchizedek had no recorded beginning or end, Jesus' priesthood is eternal. This eternal aspect of Melchizedek's priesthood helps us understand the eternal role Jesus plays as a mediator between God and humanity. One of the key themes in Hebrews is that Melchizedek's priesthood surpasses the Levitical priesthood. The text explains that Melchizedek blessed Abraham, and because of this blessing, Melchizedek is seen as greater than Abraham. By extension, Jesus, being in the order of Melchizedek, is also greater than any earthly priest. This idea challenges the religious structures of the time, showing that Jesus operates on a higher, more divine level of priesthood. It's a powerful statement about the nature of Christ's role in salvation. Hebrews also highlights that, like Melchizedek, Jesus is both king and priest. This dual role, which we explored earlier, is a significant theme in understanding Christ's authority. Jesus doesn't just intercede for humanity as a priest, he also rules over creation as a king. This combination makes his role unique and emphasizes his ability to bring both justice and peace to the world. Just like Melchizedek, Jesus bridges the gap between the divine and the human. Melchizedek's significance stretches far beyond his brief appearance in the Bible. For Christians today, understanding Melchizedek helps us grasp the depth of Jesus' role as our high priest. Just as Melchizedek was a priest not by lineage, but by divine appointment, Jesus' priesthood transcends the earthly systems. This means that Jesus, like Melchizedek, offers something eternal and unbreakable. Understanding this connection deepens our appreciation of Jesus' sacrifice and his ongoing intercession for us. It reminds us that our faith is built on a foundation that is not limited by time or tradition. One of the most powerful lessons we take from Melchizedek's story is the idea of eternal priesthood. Jesus, in the order of Melchizedek, doesn't offer temporary solutions. He offers eternal redemption. For Christians, this means that no matter how much we struggle, we can always rely on Jesus as our advocate before God. This eternal priesthood offers comfort and assurance in the face of life's challenges. It's not a priesthood that requires continual sacrifices. Jesus' one sacrifice is sufficient, just as Melchizedek's role pointed to something greater. Melchizedek also teaches us about the balance between justice and mercy. As a king of righteousness and peace, his story foreshadows the dual role of Jesus Christ. Christians today can reflect on this balance in their own lives. How can we, like Melchizedek, pursue both righteousness and peace? It's a question worth pondering as we navigate our personal faith journeys. It's about living a life that mirrors Christ's example, seeking justice, extending mercy, and fostering peace in our relationships and communities. Another key takeaway from Melchizedek's role is the concept of a higher order of priesthood. By aligning Jesus with Melchizedek, the Bible shows that Christ operates on a different level from the earthly systems we often rely on. For Christians today, this means recognizing that our hope doesn't come from human institutions or traditions, but from a direct relationship with God through Jesus Christ. Melchizedek's priesthood reminds us that we can bypass the noise of the world and seek a deeper, personal connection with God. Melchizedek's legacy is one of mystery, faith, and divine purpose. Even though he appears briefly in the Bible, his impact resonates throughout both the Old and New Testaments. He reminds us that God's plan often unfolds in unexpected ways and through unexpected people. Melchizedek's role as both king and priest sets the stage for understanding Jesus' eternal priesthood, which goes beyond the boundaries of earthly systems. This makes Melchizedek a crucial figure in biblical history, as his story opens the door to deeper reflections on faith, righteousness, and divine authority. When we consider Melchizedek's legacy, it's clear that he represents something bigger than his immediate context. His blessing of Abraham and his role as a priest of the Most High God point to a greater narrative at play, a narrative that culminates in the person of Jesus Christ. For Christians, this connection offers a profound insight into how the Old Testament often foreshadows the New Testament, weaving together a story of redemption that spans both. In this sense, Melchizedek's legacy is not just about his own time, but about the eternal truths his story represents. Melchizedek's presence in both Genesis and Hebrews offers a continuous thread between the two testaments. His legacy is not tied to one period in history, but stretches across time, reflecting the eternal nature of God's plan for humanity. For Christians today, this encourages us to look beyond the immediate and consider how God's purposes unfold over generations. Melchizedek's brief but powerful role invites us to trust in God's timing and to see our lives as part of a much larger story, one that transcends the limitations of the present. The legacy of Melchizedek also challenges us to reflect on our own roles in the world. Like Melchizedek, we are called to be figures of righteousness and peace, bringing light into situations of darkness. His story is a reminder that we don't need to have all the answers or a long history of greatness to make an impact. Sometimes, the most powerful legacies are left by those who appear briefly but shine brightly. It's a legacy we can aspire to in our own spiritual journeys. Now that you've discovered who Melchizedek was and why he plays such a pivotal role, what will you do with this knowledge? Are you ready to dig deeper into the incredible connections between the Old and New Testaments? The lessons of faith, redemption, and priesthood aren't just for ancient times. They're relevant for you today. Think about it. What areas of your life could benefit from embracing the eternal priesthood that Jesus offers, the one that Melchizedek foreshadowed? What would happen if you approached life with the same righteousness and peace that Melchizedek symbolized? It's a challenge, but the rewards could be life-changing. So, before you go, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. There's so much more to uncover in the depths of these biblical stories, and we're just getting started.